My name is Garrett Collins with Blue Water Mortgage.
And I'm Rick Schlager with Blue Water Mortgage.
And today we're going to be going through a couple questions. The first one is, can I roll closing costs in on a purchase loan?
Well, it's an interesting question, Garrett. So there are quite a few different ways for you to actually accomplish that, but not in the traditional way that you would think. So in other words, let's use an example here. Let's say we're buying a house for $400,000 and closing costs come to 10 grand. And if you decide you want to put a 20% down payment down on $400,000, that's $80,000. But if you roll back in 10 grand in closing costs, what it looks like to the lender is you're really only putting down $70,000. So in that case, it changes your loan to value. Now your loan to value bumps up over 80%. Mm-hmm. And because of that, we have to add back PMI. So that's not an effective way to do it. The other ways to do it, there's a couple of different ways. We can get a credit from the sellers or a credit from the lender. Mm-hmm. So there's a couple of different ways to do that. The first being the seller. Oftentimes, let's use that same example. Let's say we were going with a $400,000 purchase price with 10 grand in closing costs. If you make an offer for $410,000 with the seller paying $10,000 towards the buyer's closing costs, now technically you're financing those closing costs. Mm-hmm. So it's a paperless transaction. The customer is never really going to see that money, but at the closing, on the closing disclosure, there's going to be a credit from the sellers to the buyers for $10,000 towards their closing costs.
And then in that example, it's like the seller getting $400,000 for the property instead of $410,000.
Correct. Now,
Gotcha.
The seller, given that they're putting a 20% down payment on, is now going to have to put up $82,000 mm-hmm. as a down payment rather than $80,000, but the other remaining closing costs are technically financed into the loan.
Gotcha.
So that's one way to do it. Why don't you talk about the other way?
Yeah, and a couple other things is the closing costs can entail the closing costs along with prepaid expenses, so tax escrows, home insurance prepaids, per diem interest. So you can really encompass all of that into it. With a 5% down conventional loan, you can get up to 3% back towards buyers' closing costs and prepaids. If you put down more, you can even get up to 6% back if you put down 10% or more.
Yep.
So that's something to look at there. The other way in which you can get some money back is through a lender credit. And that takes place when we give you a credit to pay for your closing costs. So we see this a lot on refinances, most often, where you'll hear of a no closing cost refinance.
Yep.
That is us. You'll get a little bit higher rate, potentially about 1/8 to 1/4 higher, but we'll cover those closing costs for you.
Excellent.
For more information, reach out to bluewatermtg.com.